Anita Patel, senior urologist practicing at Mumbai, and her interests are in bladder dysfunction and urodynamics. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. At the outset, I wish to thank the organizers of this prestigious event for asking me to be one of the faculty. It is indeed an honor for me. I have been asked to speak regarding evaluation of an abnormal bladder in a prospective recipient, primarily to decide, is this bladder hostile, and is this recipient bladder okay to receive a future transplant? As I always insist, in these situations, bladder becomes the head of the family actually. And in a family such as urinary tract, if the head is happy, the entire family is happy. If the head is unhappy, the entire family bears the brunt. And no other situation than a recipient bladder which can testify to that, because if the bladder is misbehaving, the future kidney transplant, of course, can misbehave. So let's understand normal urinary bladder function. As we all know, the bladder must store at low pressure without any leak, and it must empty also at low pressure, or rather at normal pressure. And we all should have ability to void irrespective of bladder volume. This is a standard diagram all of us studied, just to let you know about the neuronal innervation of the bladder. S for storage, P for peeing. So sympathetics help us store urine and parasympathetics help us in emptying the urine. The external sphincter is the only voluntary control. The reflex center is in the sacral spinal cord, but modulated by the pontine center and higher control by the frontal lobes. Let's see what's the first event of micturition. The first event is relaxation of external sphincter, which is voluntary. Second event, which follows that, is the contraction of detrusor, which is involuntary or autonomic. And the third event, where the bladder neck opens, also an autonomic event, but here the urination cannot be stopped. That means if I don't relax the external sphincter, I can stop my urination. If I have relaxed the external sphincter, the detrusor has started contracting, I can contract my external sphincter and still abort the detrusor contraction. So this is still a stage where I can stop urination. But if the first two events have happened and the third event, where the bladder neck opens, it has started, now there is no way we can stop urination. As we all know, post-TURP, the incontinence will develop only if the external sphincter is injured, because we know during TURP, we actually remove the mechanism of internal sphincter. Now, when we study all this behavior urodynamically, how do we evaluate that? So the resting pressure in the urinary bladder during urodynamics should usually be below 10. That means the bladder is normally compliant. And if the pressure must rise, the rise in pressure should not be more than 10 centimeters for every 100 mLs we fill. For example, if I have filled 200 mLs at a correct speed, the intra-detrusor pressure should not be more than 20 centimeters, and so on. The capacity, as we know, is a range. And normally there should be no overactivity or no involuntary contractions during filling phase. The voiding pressures are as given, less than 20 for a woman and between 40 to 60 actually for a male. And the flow, as we all know, is a bell-shaped curve with a Qmax, which is appropriate for a male or a female sex. What are the surgical goals in a transplant? We all know that. I shouldn't have to say that in this meeting, but from bladder point of view, we must have a recipient bladder to function as a reservoir which stores at low pressure for a socially acceptable time, and it must empty at will at normal pressure without any residue. So coming to who needs invasive bladder evaluation before a transplantation, how do we decide that a particular bladder could be hostile? So it is reserved in cases where there is a clear-cut history suggestive of voiding dysfunction, with or without dilated upper tracts, with or without small bladder capacity. What is the minimum non-invasive evaluation which is required? So before we consider that, let's look at each title separately. Our aim is to decide that the storage and voiding pressures are physiological, and non-hostile. So the bare minimum evaluation is the history, where you must confirm that the patient was voiding at will before the CKD even started. Check about the kind of urinary flow he had, and the minimum evaluation, of course, would be a flowmetry. Now, we all know it would be difficult in somebody who is oliguric, but we can study that by filling the bladder and making the person pass urine on a flow meter. What about any residue? Well, we know all transplant recipients will have had a sonography, which will automatically tell you not about the residue alone, but also about if the upper tracts are dilated. So this is done in everybody. What about MCU? MCU is done in everybody if the upper tracts are dilated. That means if there is no history of any voiding or storage symptoms, if the flow was satisfactory, if a flowmetry is good, if the sonography simply shows medical renal disease, then there is no need for MCU, nor is there any need for any further evaluation. So this is classically applicable in the bladder in an adult CKD who has medical renal disease, but no past urological history such as slow flow, frequency, so on and so forth. Such a bladder, even if it stays for a long period of time with oliguria, once the transplant is done, the bladder starts behaving as if nothing was wrong, which is why all transplant recipients don't need bladder evaluation, because their bladder was normal to start with. So what is the correct timing of urodynamics? As soon as we have decided that any abnormality which merits invasive UDS, as per the previous evaluation is noticed by us, such a person should have a urodynamic. When should you do it? Well, at least 6 months before the future transplant, so that we are able to take some action. What about the type of test? Well, very basic pressure flow study with or without EMG, and with or without either a video or a separate MCU. Remember, for an oliguric transplant recipient, always use a slow fill speed and not a standard 50 ml in everybody. Customize it based on the patient's age and expected bladder capacity. The standard techniques are followed in all. What question am I answering? Is this bladder physiologically normal, or is it likely to be hostile to the future transplant? Not only that, are there any pre-transplant measures needed to improve the condition medically or surgically? So I'm just going to discuss two cases. First is a 10-year-old boy who presented with slow flow of urine and had valve fulguration at the age of 3. Now he is with us, 10 years of age, voids up to 320 ml per void, 2 to 3 hourly. His clothes are wet, sometimes both day and night. He passes hard motion. He is on already antimuscarinics, antihypertensives, etc. Sono shows bilateral dilated upper tracts with minimum residue. Earlier, MCU was not available. There was a question mark about presence of bilateral VUR with a creatinine of 3.5, clinically short stature as expected with that creatinine. No external urological abnormality. Let's look at the flow at the bottom left half of the screen. It's a prolonged flow, box-shaped curve, characterless curve, and the voided volume is on the lower side for a boy who is 10 years of age. Now let's look at the cystometry and pressure flow graph, which is in the upper right half. If you all can see, there is a steadily rising filling pressure, which is in the form of green line, no overactivity. And if you see the voiding pressure is within normal limit for his age. There is no straining, as you can see on the black line. We haven't done an EMG. So the end fill pressure here, if you look at the graph below, at maximum cystometric capacity of 301, the end fill pressure is 28. The questions I'm supposed to answer, is this capacity okay for his age? So we all know the formula, age plus 2, 10 plus 2 multiplied by 30. So the capacity is perhaps borderline. What about the end fill pressure? 28. Normally, as per the definition of compliance, this end fill pressure would be okay, but does he have reflux? We don't really know. So I insisted on doing his MCU. Otherwise, his voiding behavior is not hostile and there is no overactivity. So this looks like a harmless urodynamics, but let's wait. This is the same person's MCU. And if you see carefully, there is both active and passive unilateral grade 5 reflux. And we know that this acts as a pop-off. That means the pressure which we are reading is in presence of such high grade reflux. And that means the pressure in reality will be way higher because the reflux is allowing the pressure leak. Now, if we go back, is this bladder hostile? And the answer is unanimous yes, because the end fill pressure, which was 30 or 28 at 300 ml, is likely to be way higher had it not been for the pressure leak. So this is where an MCU and urodynamics can be matched judiciously to give us intelligent information. Let's see some classic graphs of a myogenic failure. So both these are valve patients. I want all of you to first look at the top graph. No overactivity, but see very poor compliance. So at the end of filling, which is barely 180 mLs, that figure is not very clear. The filling pressure is almost 60 centimeters. This bladder is hostile. Is the voiding phase hostile? No, that is not hostile because there is hardly any detrusor activity. See the bottom graph. Again, the end fill pressure. The pressure is barely 20 plus, but the capacity is only 62. Again, a hostile bladder, because not only it is small in capacity, but the end fill pressure, which means the compliance, is very, very poor. So even though the voiding pressures are not high, it is the storage pressure which decides if a particular bladder is hostile. Now, I'm just going to jump this detailed history. I'm just going to show you the graph. So this girl had suspected dysfunctional voidings. Look at her flowmetry, very slow for a girl child, and she's voided 130 mLs with a Qmax, which is barely 3.4, very slow for a grown-up girl. She was a 10, 12-year-old girl. And look at the graph below. The graph on the left half shows the filling cystometry, and we have filled about 330 ml. The pressure is not bad at all. The pressure is barely rising. So I would say the compliance is not bad. Let us look at her voiding phase. The voiding phase here is hostile. For a girl child, she's got a sphincter which is dyssynergic because she's a dysfunctional voider. And if you see, the sphincter is repeatedly throwing contractions every time there is a rise in detrusor pressure. And that means her outlet is hostile. So even though her storage pressure is not bad, every time she makes an attempt to void, she's going to raise repeated episodes of high pressure. So if I were to consider her for a future transplant, let's just understand, is she okay for alpha blockers? Perhaps, because in a girl child, alpha blockers will work at the bladder neck level, and we don't know whether it is bladder neck or the external sphincter alone. What about neuromodulation? Yes, perhaps. Can we give Botox in her external sphincter? Yes, 100%. Is she a likely candidate for transplant? Maybe not right now. Her creatinine was 2 at the age of 13 or 14, but maybe in future. In that case, if she were to receive a transplant, is there any additional treatment required? Yes, because her outlet needs attention because she has high voiding pressure. So, in conclusion, can we put a transplant in a compromised bladder? Well, needless to say, unless bladder abnormality is sorted out, transplant cannot be done because that will affect the newly received kidney the same way. However, let us understand there is no good substitute for urinary bladder. So if I were to give a take-home message, a non-invasive evaluation, including flowmetry, should be done in all recipients. Any patient who has history of voiding dysfunction with or without dilated upper tracts needs to be fully evaluated, as I have mentioned before. All patients with valves and neuropaths need evaluation. Once we have decided about the hostility of the bladder, try medical treatment first, use CIC liberally, use antimuscarinic liberally, and reserve surgery only in special cases. Do the surgery preferably as a separate procedure pre-transplant so that you will be able to assess the suitability and if the patient is doing CIC, etc. And in the end, the whole thing is a joint decision of not only the treating physicians, nurses, parents, and of course, the patient, either an adult or a child. There are excellent articles which I would urge all of you to look up, because not many centers do kidney transplant in a compromised bladder. So there are selected good reading materials available. Please look at those. Thank you so much.